I'm convinced she tried to drown me. This happened when I was still a child, so some of the details are pretty hazy, like my exact age when this happened. Also, English is not my first language, so apologies in advance for any mistakes. Not far from where I lived as a child, there is a place where one of the local rivers cascades over on Old Weir, and it's a really beautiful spot to bathe and swim during summer. The water upstream from the weir is nice and calm. The river has a lot of fish and lots of pretty flowers on the riverbanks, and there's even a small kiosk and a place where you can rent paddle boats. If the weather is nice, there are usually a lot of people of all ages picnicking, sunbathing, swimming, fishing, and just hanging out. Families, couples, teenagers, seniors, everybody likes to go there. When I was a kid, my mom would also take me there pretty often, and it was always a lot of fun. Usually I wanted to play in the water for hours, and my mom would quickly retire to our picnic blanket and pick up a book. I could already swim fairly well by age 6, but she still watched me closely when I was younger, so I would estimate that I was at least 8 when this happened, but not older than 11. It was a beautiful, warm summer day at the river. My mom was reading her book and let me explore the area and go swimming on my own. As was normal on days like these, there were a lot of people, and especially a lot of teenagers up at the crest of the weir where most people entered the water. I'm afraid I don't remember the details of how it happened, but I sort of befriended one of the teenage girls there. She was there on her own, and since I was still really young, I thought she was so mature and cool, basically just for being an older girl who was doing things on her own. No idea how old she really was, as everybody who is older than you at that age is just old. But looking back, I would guess between 14 and 16. She was really nice to me and seemed to enjoy hanging out with me, and I got to feel like I had an older sister for a while, which was nice. We spent some time exploring the riverbanks, diving, watching fish, and chasing each other around. At one point, we ended up at a spot where the water was about chest high for my friend and neck high for me, close to a group of other teenage girls who were about the same age as my new friend. I noticed one of them seemed really reluctant to get into the water and complained that it was freezing. I was still a pretty loud-mouthed and brash child at the time, a far cry from how I am now, and also really proud of my clearly superior swimming skills. So I turned to my friend and said something pretty harmless about that girl being a big wuss or something like that. I wasn't loud, but she heard. Her head snapped up and she immediately jumped into the water and came at me shouting, "What did you say? What did you say about me?" I was freaked out right away because her reaction was so sudden and she seemed so enraged in a way that was way disproportionate to what I had said. I opened my mouth to defend myself somehow and maybe de-escalate, but before I even knew what was happening, she had grabbed me and pushed me underwater. I struggled for a moment and she let me come up again. I think I heard my friend protest in the background, but I was mostly concerned with this girl who still had a death grip on both of my shoulders. She stared at me with a look that made me really uncomfortable, like she was fighting with herself or trying to control herself. "What did you say to me?" she screamed at me. Scared as I was, I resented how helpless I felt, and that I was being humiliated in front of this cool girl I had befriended, so I resolved not to show any weakness. You know this obnoxious thing some kids do when someone tells them off and they just start giggling and laughing like they're laughing at you because they don't want anyone to see that they feel bad? I did that. I laughed right in her face, and right away she forced me underwater again and held me down for quite a moment longer than the first time. When she let me come up again, she screamed right in my face, "You think this is funny? You like that? You want to laugh at me, you little bitch?" I was coughing up water by this point and drooling all over myself, but I didn't know what else to do or say to make her stop, and the only thought I had left in my head was that I couldn't show weakness. So I laughed at her again, and I may or may not have made another remark to the effect that unlike her, I didn't mind a little water. I'm not sure anymore. What I distinctly remember, and will remember forever, is her eyes in that moment. It's hard to describe, but the closest I can get is by telling you that something seemed to leave her eyes, some spark or whatever you want to call it, that normal, sane people have just flickered and went out. It suddenly looked like her eyes were just 2 pieces of hard-painted glass stuck in her face, and there was nothing behind them. I would have apologized then and begged her to just leave me alone, but it was too late. She grabbed me by the throat and by the hair and pushed me underwater again. I struggled as hard as I could, swirling up mud from the riverbed, grabbing at pebbles, but it didn't help. I thought surely she will let me up in a moment, she just wants to scare me really bad. But I was running out of air quickly, and her grip on my throat did not ease up even a little bit. I tried scratching her arm, but I was starting to lose any sense of where up or down was or what I was grabbing at. When I opened my eyes, everything was just muddy brown and full of bubbles. I realized I was going to drown right here. I was actually being killed by this complete stranger while the sun was shining peacefully and we were surrounded by happy families and nobody realized what was happening. I'm grateful I don't remember fully what that felt like. When I try to think back to that moment, I just get this feeling of utter helplessness and loneliness. And then suddenly I was breathing air. I was completely disoriented, coughing and puking up water, and there was a lot of shouting around me. My friend was holding me above water and shouting in the direction of the group of girls who were forcefully leading my attacker away, while she was screaming at me and my friend, while her friends were screaming at her. Just a lot of noise in general, and I have no recollection of what anyone was saying. I was busy enjoying air again. After I had calmed down somewhat, my new friend apologized for stepping in so late, saying she and the other girls took a moment to process what was actually happening before they started trying to pull my attacker off of me. It took all of their efforts combined to get her to let me go. I was deeply, deeply shaken because I was entirely sure she had attempted to murder me then and there. I just knew from the look in her eyes. But still trying to save face from my friend, I tried to laugh it off. I did a lousy job because I was shivering all over and my voice was trembling. I don't know if my friend had realized at any point how serious the situation actually was, or if she thought she was just stopping some bullying. But whatever she thought, she bought me ice cream and rented us a paddle boat to cheer me up, and we watched some birds, and I'm grateful to her for that. And, for saving my life. But to be really honest, my day was kind of ruined. I never saw my attacker or the nice teenage girl again after that day, and I said nothing to my mom because I was so embarrassed about what had happened to me. But that, and some other things that happened to me later, cost me most of the confident attitude I had as a child, and I'm a very shy and cautious person nowadays. Story 2. The cat tries to warn us. I grew up in a small rural town where nothing ever happens. The sort of place where it wasn't unusual to leave your doors unlocked and your closest neighbors are a mile or so from your house. Our family also had this giant old cat, Tag, who was a bit of a drama king, but we loved him. One summer when I was around 9 or 10 years old, the cat starts going ballistic. Tag generally slept in my room curled up next to me until I fell asleep and then would get up to doing whatever cat things he did at night. Occasionally, he would meow or try to wake me up on unfortunate nights when he could see the bottom of his food bowl and needed a midnight snack. Usually, if I ignored him, he would give up or rarely go try to wake up my mom instead. This night, however, he bangs against my parents' bedroom door until he gets in and is meowing loud enough to wake us up. Our bedroom doors were next to each other, and I called to Tag to come to bed because it's about 2 a.m. He is having none of it and is carrying on. My mom gets up, goes down to the kitchen, and then huffs back up with Tag on her heels, still meowing insanely. She said his bowl had plenty of food, and he just walked her to the door of the kitchen. Tag was an indoor-outdoor cat, but had his own cat door through the garage, so there was no need for one of us to let him out. My mom said my brother must have left the kitchen door open and just the screen door was shut, but she wasn't holding it open forever for the cat to just stand there and not go out. She shut the kitchen door and went back to sleep, firmly shutting her bedroom door this time so Tag couldn't let himself back into their room. I always kept treats for him in my room and offered him one, but he was still meowing at their door, trying to get them up. I grabbed him and bring him into my room and shut my door to try to get him to sleep. I lay in bed trying to go back to sleep and Tag meows at my door wanting back out. I finally open my door and he bolts back downstairs towards the kitchen, and that's when I heard what sounded like a door slamming. I have 3 older siblings though, and someone is always up watching TV or running to the bathroom, so I think nothing of it. The cat finally stalks back into my room, but instead of curling up in my armpit like usual, he sat at the bottom of my bed staring at my door. I fell asleep until morning when some commotion wakes me up, and I pad down to the kitchen to find my parents on the phone with the police. They got up as usual to get ready for work, and while making coffee, my mom went to grab her rings from the little jewelry dish she had by the sink, because she would take them off in the evenings to rinse dishes and load the dishwasher, but discovered the dish was empty this morning. Small town, so the sheriff sends a deputy over, and when my dad walks out to meet them, sees the ATV is missing from out back. The key is off the key ring. My brothers are all up at this point too, and we are all freaked out that while we were sleeping, some robber came in and removed the ATV key and saw an opportunity to take my mom's rings. They were asking if we had any clue when it happened, and my parents say no. My mom asked my middle brother, who was a freshman in college and home for the summer, what time he ended up off the couch last night, and if he heard anything. He said he went to bed at 10 or 11 and asked what she meant as his bedroom was in the basement, and he wouldn't have heard anything in the kitchen. She said, "But you were in the living room off the kitchen when I went to feed the cat and shut the door. You left open and I told you not to sleep on my couch and go to your bed as I went back upstairs." He told Mom he was in the basement since dinner and never went out or came upstairs again. He watched a movie in the basement living room before going to bed in his own bedroom. She goes white and realizes that the cat must have been trying to warn us someone came into the house, and the robber dove onto the couch and covered up to hide when she came to the kitchen and exited after she went back to bed. The cops said for someone to be so brazen, they probably knew our family, knew our habits, but didn't count on the cat being so overprotective and had probably intended to steal more, but was afraid the cat may wake the whole house. It has been over 20 years since this happened, and the robber was never caught, but it is unnerving to think it was probably someone who had been to our home before as a friend. Thank God for our cat. Story 3. Fitting room is for trying on clothes, so stop making me uncomfortable. I have been working at a department store for the past 2 years. Although retail wasn't something I wanted to necessarily do, it was much better than my previous job in the food business, so I was grateful to not have to touch food all day, and would take the world of customer service much more gratefully than the food industry. It was the middle of January, and store is usually quite dead towards the end of the day. Usually the following month after Christmas is never really busy, due to people probably not trying to spend money after the gift-giving season, and the cold weather of the winter season in Canada never really helped the situation much. People not in the mood to leave the comfort of their own houses in the middle of a snowstorm. That meant that they put less people on shift, and I was alone in the fitting room. I work at a pretty big store, and alongside the weather conditions, that meant that the employees were usually spread out on the floor, not within close proximity in comparison to what they put during the busy season. None of us wore earpieces, as we did most of our paging through the speaker system. It was a Wednesday night around 8, and the store closed at 9. I was usually put on the cash register, but often frequented the fitting room when they needed the help. It was a very quiet night, and I spent the first couple hours of my shift helping organize the beauty section that is right next to the fitting room, or go speak to my lovely coworker who worked in the jewelry section, helping the few customers that actually wanted to try clothes on when they came by. There was a man who came to the fitting room with 2 dress shirts, and I didn't think anything of it. After all, he was nothing I've never seen before. Older, tall, kind of stocky, muscular, plain. I did notice that he seemed dressed rather nicely, a clearly expensive suit and a nice shoulder bag. I assumed he must have come to the store after his day at work. I counted the number of articles he was bringing in, as that was mandatory in order for me to monitor the flow of clothes and try to stop theft. Handed him a number corresponding to the number of articles he was taking in, and asked him politely to put the clothes back on the hanger, in French rather than English because Quebec requires us to speak French first to customers, to which he replied with a simple, "No problem." I noticed he had a thick accent, although I wasn't and still not able to place my finger on it. I think it might have been Russian, but I can't say for sure. The man walked into the fitting room, and I didn't think much of it. I helped the other customers who came out of their rooms, counting the articles they came out with, and matched it with their numbers, and hung them back on their place on the rack. A few moments passed by, and the man came out. Not really putting much thought into it, I took the both dress shirts from him. He didn't want any of them, and took back his number, said thank you, and turned to place the clothes on their rack. Usually this was the point where the customer would just leave the fitting room, but when I turned around to go back to the front, he was still there. I asked him if there was anything I could do for him, or if he still wanted the shirts that I had just put away. He smiled and looked at me, not answering, and I felt a weird feeling in the pit of my stomach. He was looking at me as if he wanted to say something, and me, being the 5'4" girl who hates confrontation of any kind, just nervously laughed and started to organize the desk at the front of the fitting room entrance, awkwardly arranging all the numbers although they were already in order. He asked for my name, to which I just looked down at the name tag I was wearing and repeated it. He told me it was a beautiful name. I laughed nervously, never knowing what to do in these sort of situations, and being nice to him was a part of my job in customer service. Besides, he didn't do anything wrong, just complimented me. I said thank you, and looked away, avoiding eye contact. He then just stood there, for what felt like 20 minutes, but in reality was just 3. He stood there as I helped other customers, and it was beginning to make me very uncomfortable. Not wanting to be rude, but also not wanting to subject myself to being uncomfortable for the rest of my shift, or however long he was planning to be there. I asked him if there was anything else he needed help with. Here's where I began to get scared. He then proceeded to tell me that he will be waiting for me at 9:30 outside the doors of our store. He wanted to take me out. Confused, I looked at him oddly. How did he know that we finished at that time? The store closed at 9, and we usually spend 30 minutes cleaning up the store. I suppose that information isn't hard to guess, but it still felt weird. Why did he want to take me out? I once again laughed nervously, because that seemed to be the only thing I was able to do when uncomfortable, and politely declined, saying I had to get home and study. He laughed, taking a step closer towards me, and I instinctively took a step back. He didn't accept that answer because he just smiled once more. I'll be waiting for you outside the door where all the employees leave from, in the truck alley. I'll be there. There was a door that employees exited the mall from because the normal doors usually locked around 9:15, and we always finished later than that. So we take the door that takes us in a slight alley where all the trucks go to drop off shipments for our store. Being someone who hates confrontation and who doesn't do well with controlling my emotions, I felt myself start to tear up at his comment. No employee is allowed to mention the door we leave from. It's a company rule. Since we usually finish late and the parking lot is dark, they don't want anyone to know where we exit from, as a precaution. I told him once more that I appreciated his offer, but I wasn't interested, and I had to continue my work. I politely told him to leave when he put a hand on my shoulder and I felt myself freeze up. I remember thinking, praying that one of my coworkers would show up to pick up the rack, or the jewelry employee would stop filling the cases and turn around. Obviously, with my luck, nobody did. He told me I was a pretty girl and he couldn't wait to meet me in the alley at the end of my shift. He said he has a nice apartment and had a cute dog, as if the dog was going to make me change my mind. And we could have a fun time. Desperate, I said I have a boyfriend and he was going to be picking me up, hoping that would deter him, but he just laughed. He said my name and then told me that wasn't something that usually stopped him, placing his hand on my shoulder this time. I honestly really began to feel scared and excused myself to use the phone on my desk, shaking his hand off of me that I hadn't realized was gripped on me so tightly. I paged the number for my coordinator, who curtly replied before I was even able to get a word in that she was busy with a customer and hung up. Unsure of what to do, as the man was still next to me as he followed me to my desk, I called my manager, who thankfully replied. When he saw that I was speaking with someone on the phone, he left the fitting room, but that didn't make me feel any better. I told my manager what had happened, and with good reason, she freaked out, telling me I need to report him immediately, reminding me that with people like that, I really have to be careful. She told me to call security, to which I did, and the security guard told me he had an eye on him through the camera. It was around 8:30 at this point, and I was getting ready to start my closing tasks, still paranoid about what the man had said. To be fair, I am a paranoid person, and I watch way too many murder documentaries, so I may be overthinking. This sounded like the beginning of an abduction movie, honestly. I kind of calmed down, not seeing the man anymore, when the security guard called me back. He wanted to let me know that the man had never left, and was circling the store. I felt more dread than before pop up in my stomach. He didn't leave? Thankfully, he hadn't come back to see me. I felt kind of better for the fact that the security guard had seen him, so if anything did happen, there was someone who was able to identify him. One again, overthinking. By the time the store closed and it was time to leave, two of my coworkers, Evan and Ethan, two boys who worked in the warehouse, made sure to walk with me all the way to my car, not letting me be alone. I appreciated it a lot. Although I didn't want to admit it, I was scared walking through that alley, and I was even paranoid he was going to follow me home. I took the extra long route to see if anyone was trailing me, to which he wasn't. When I walked through the safety of the door of my house and locked it behind me, I let go of a breath I wasn't even aware I was holding in. I make sure now to always leave the store using the buddy system. I never walk alone, and I always make sure I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. I never wear my name tag anymore.